The word teacher and union should not be synonymous. The significant majority of schools in the state of Colorado are not union-led, and the significant majority of schools in the state of Colorado outperform the union-led schools. Certainly in El Paso County, District 11 has notoriously been the lowest performing school district, and we were the only unionized system out of 17 school districts in the county. So do your own math. Why be fear-based? Let's create vision, let's create opportunity.
Welcome to the OpEdge, the Gazette's opinion podcast, where we bring you cutting-edge perspectives from Colorado's top newsmakers, columnists, and more. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, investigative columnist and your host for the program. Michael Gaal is the superintendent of schools for Colorado Springs District 11. He has an extensive background in education, including past service as deputy chancellor of D.C. Public Schools and Chief of Staff of Oakland Unified School District. Prior to that, he worked in education-facing leadership roles in the private sector. A graduate of the Air Force Academy right here in Colorado, Superintendent Gaal is a retired colonel in the U.S. Air Force. Superintendent Michael Gaal, welcome to the OpEdge.
Thank you, Jimmy. I'm happy to be here.
It's great to have you and appreciate you taking the time today. So let's talk about yourself and your background for just a moment. When it comes to your work in education, both in the public and private sectors, and also your military background, give us an eye into who Michael Gaal is.
Yeah, I arrived in Colorado Springs on July 5th, 1985. I remember being mad at my parents. I grew up in New Jersey because I had no idea how beautiful and amazing it was to finally be in Colorado for the first time in my life. And I've spent really the entirety of my military and education career trying to come back. So I couldn't be happier to be back here in the Colorado Springs School District 11 in the heart of our city of Colorado Springs.
When it comes to your background in these various roles, including military service, what are some of the key lessons that you have taken away and applied to your role as superintendent of D11?
Yeah, I think the first thing is when I think about the idea of professions, teachers as a profession. I was an aviator in my time in the military, a professional soldier. In the military, we left nothing to chance. We left no soldier behind. Failure was not an option. This idea of on-time takeoff meant an on-time landing. I'm very proud that I have exactly the same number of landings as I do takeoffs. This idea that we would move every ounce of our country to ensure that we protected our interests. When I think then about the parallel in a public education, we seem to leave everything to chance. We don't really close the loop. We continue to slide down in international standards against both our allies and our enemies and how they're able to educate their youth. And we just refuse to address the really root cause of those challenges, which is why are we allowing unions to dictate what happens in education?
I'm glad you brought us there. The Gazette recently editorialized, and we may talk a bit about this, in an editorial entitled "Teachers Schools Do Better Without a Union Contract." It notes that of Colorado's 179 school districts, only fewer than 40 have a master agreement, or what you might call fully unionized school districts. District 11 recently, in the last few years, became the last school district in El Paso County to leave behind a teachers union, cutting off in terms of the master agreement. When you look at that decision and what that has meant for the district and enabled you to do as superintendent, what are a few key things that come to mind?
Yeah, let me start and make sure I give thanks and praise to the bravery and the courage of a Board of Education to actually navigate the ending of a master agreement. Our Board of Education needed 2 election cycles to be able to overcome the way that was written, because of course it's written to ensure that it can protect itself. And that's always a challenge. So I really appreciate the board for their courage to actually do better for children. And I also want to be super specific here that the word teacher and union should not be synonymous. Thank you to every teacher in America. Thank you for giving the entirety of your professional career to ensuring that children get a better opportunity at the end of the day than they did at the beginning of the day. I think what's happened here is that unions get into the space because they create a fear among the workforce that says without our protections, the evil do-gooder of a board of education or a superintendent will eliminate your job or will move you without asking or will place you into a space where a child actually needs more than we're able to deliver on. From a business perspective, you always want to make sure that you're putting your money where your mouth is and making sure that the best talent is going against the largest issue. So things that we've been able to do in just the first year without having a master agreement is we've actually been able to pay teachers differently than we've ever paid them before without taking money away from the existing teacher pool. We've been able to pay teachers who are working in Title I schools that are on the state watch list significantly more money and ask for them more training time to ensure that those students who need more get more. That's a standard business model that every business in America runs on. We've been able to actually bring back retired teachers, many of whom were the most arduous of supporters for the master agreement, and now bring them back as teachers coaching teachers because I can pay them their old daily rate, where the master agreement used to say I could only pay them a substitute rate. Why would somebody that was making $300+ a day retire and then come back and work for $100 a day? Like they're not even really big ideas. They're just logical conclusions of you should put your money where your mouth is. You should pay the best teachers in the system to go after the hardest problems. And you should have an entire structure that celebrates all teachers because, again, teaching is the hardest profession in America.
Do you have any thoughts then, Superintendent Gaal, on why you do have districts in Colorado who embrace the union to the point of a master agreement as though it is an important part of their institution? What is the mentality there if districts like 11 are able to have the kind of latitude, freedom, and flexibility that you're talking about? Why wouldn't some of these other school districts embrace what the vast majority of districts have done and say no more to a master agreement?
Yeah, I believe most of it's fear-based. District 11 has lost a third of its student population over the last 20 years, while El Paso County has doubled in its population. And certainly not every kid in El Paso County is it easy to get to a District 11 school. But the market demand signal has shown that we're shrinking, and we're shrinking because of choice. And choice is a wonderful law that we have in the state of Colorado. So unions find their way to incite fear within the individual teacher that says this idea that collectively we are better together than we are singularly responsible to our own profession. I remember I was a grocery store clerk in New Jersey in the 1980s. This is a silly story. And after my first 6 months, I got a dime raise, and half of my dime per hour raise went to my union membership. And I said, nobody asked me if I wanted to be in the union. And my boss said, you don't have a choice. And I said, look, I'm a high school kid. I'm going to work here for 6 more months, and then I'm going to go to college. I want an extra nickel per hour that is due to me for being a great grocery store clerk. So I think we have to get out of the fear-based mentality and say, if you want to do great things for kids, not just District 11, but you already pointed out, the significant majority of schools in the state of Colorado are not union-led. And the significant majority of schools in the state of Colorado outperform the union-led schools. Certainly in El Paso County, District 11 has notoriously been the lowest performing school district, and we were the only unionized system out of 17 school districts in the county. So do your own math. Why be fear-based? Let's create vision. Let's create opportunity. I'd love to sit down with the professional educators and continue to make the strategy better for children and stop hearing about what you don't have because the union's no longer here.
When you talk about union membership, your experience in New Jersey having no choice but to be a member of the union at that time, in Colorado, and a lot of teachers may not recognize this, that you don't have to join the union. In fact, I think in District 11, something on the order of like only a third of teachers are members of the union. You can look at Colorado's second largest district, Jefferson County Schools, something on the order of a third are members of the union. That's it. And they have a master agreement, meaning the union is representing the vast majority of teachers in Jeffco who aren't even members themselves of the union. You see that in district after district where the majority of teachers are not members of the union. Talk to us about that for a moment in the context of District 11.
Yeah, we've seen membership go from what we estimated a couple of years ago to be the upper 50s, maybe 60% of our total teachers, down into somewhere in the 30%. I'll give you a really poignant example. Last year, when the union decided a month before the board elections, 6 months after the master agreement had expired, to hold a one-day strike, which really wasn't a strike. It was a day for union members to go knock on doors and hand out flyers of who they should vote for. In all that buildup, I needed 220 subs to cover the day. We have roughly 1,500 teachers that man our schools every day. I needed 220 subs to keep schools open, to make sure that children were safe, to make sure that children had a productive learning environment. And so, yeah, I'm certain that they will tell you that they had a far higher number of people on the picket line. They're not active teachers, they're retired teachers, they're spouses, there are other people within the community that support what the union was propagating. And it's really just a lot of misinformation. It's unfortunate that it gets to a space that you actively, as a teacher, say, I would rather stand on the sidewalk all day than teach the children. That is the covet of what my profession actually is. And there's another important data point, because it's not the first time. April of 2025, as the governor was getting ready to push the School Finance Act, there seems to be an annual pilgrimage of unionized teachers to Denver. That, again, I needed 160 subs that day to be able to cover classes. That teachers thought that going to the Capitol and protesting outside on Colfax Street to say there's not enough money in public education is a better use of their profession than actually ensuring that third graders can read, that eighth graders are ready for high school, and that high schoolers graduate and they're ready to be a part of their local community. So I think we just have to get back to what is it that we actually expect from the publicly funded education system, instead of it, what is it that the union is actually raising dues against? If I recall, about a year and a half ago, they put a message out that said CEA, which is at the state level, stands against capitalism. Well, you just happen to be in the wrong country if you're against capitalism. So best of luck on your way out.
We see right now in Douglas County Schools a push to bring back a master agreement for the first time since 2012, when Dougco, which is one of the top-rated districts in the state, abandoned that unionization and has done quite well. It's interesting, though, when you talk about some of the opportunities that you have as a district, and I would say apply to Douglas County as well, in terms of, for example, teacher raises. In the last few years, you have seen a mill levy override, a tax increase passed by the voters of Dougco, who then had a school board that said, we are going to put into place raises as a result of that MLO without a teachers union. Same thing when you look at District 11 and the experience that you've had in that regard. You can also talk about teacher retention, which has improved in Douglas County and has improved, as I understand it, in District 11. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that experience in your district, Superintendent Gaal, when it comes to the teacher presence in the district, to filling out those full-time roles and keeping teachers as well as attracting new educators.
Yeah, the number one strategy in District 11, and really for all districts, is to ensure that students achieve, and students achieve by getting access to high quality instruction. We drive that all day long, and anytime somebody wants to stand into a space and say the district or the board is anti-teacher, like it's an oxymoron. How can you be in public education and be anti-teacher? And so I've been reading a lot about what's happening in Dougco, and I think it's unfortunate that the politics of board elections now create avenues for these ideas that all teachers should be treated exactly the same. I'm sorry, I love every one of my teachers, but up until last year, I didn't have a teacher qualified to teach Mandarin Chinese. Now I do. If I have to pay the one teacher who's qualified to teach Mandarin Chinese a different salary than one of my several hundred PE teachers, that's just what the market demands. Making sure that our children are ready for the global economy of which they are going to inherit is infinitely more important than me making sure that every one of a certain type of teacher feels equally valued across the system. This idea that what is good for one is good for all, it just doesn't exist in the market of which every one of our employees actually lives. None of them live in socialized housing. None of them live in a socialized local government. Every one of them has the right to individually vote. But then when it comes to the workplace, this idea that I need to be represented by another entity completely breaks down the way that they live their life. It becomes the greatest hypocrisy of what exists and what the union says that it calls for. So I'll give you a really specific example. The first year in the 2023, building the 23-24 year school budget, I came into this concept called interest-based bargaining, which is what the master agreement says how we have to negotiate salaries. First of all, there's very little room to negotiate salaries. It's how much money you get from the state, which comes from the tax base. It's a very complicated formula. You can look at the School Finance Act, look at the student weights. It's as predictably short every year as you hope that it wouldn't be. In the first 2 hours that I arrived, myself and the former board president met with the union president and their legal counsel in what we call a small group. And in 2 hours' time, we figured out within 0.25% what the actual raise was going to be that year. We had a very productive conversation. They were smart, they were intelligent, they understood what their teachers needed and wanted. And then we went into a 60-hour process of just performance theater, where we sit around the table and you tell me what you want and I tell you what I want. And we went and we spent every Tuesday and Thursday and who's late to the meeting and people are coming on showing up after work. And the whole thing is about building drama around the system. And at the end of the 60th hour, we ended up right back where we started from. With the limited amount of money that we got, the obligations of the school system without being driven by the union to get there, that says we want our teachers to be paid better than any other teacher in the county because we want the best teachers in the county because my kids are the furthest behind. That just has to be that simple. And so this idea that Douglas County, who really doesn't have a worry in the world when it comes from education, is going to restrict the potential future growth of kids that need more because now you're going to have to slow everything down. You're going to have to go through all these dog and pony shows of who believes what and how they feel about it. Man, I'm telling you, man, if I could get access to the quality of what happens in Douglas County for the kids here in El Paso County, better watch out. Colorado Springs will eat up Denver in about a decade. So my recommendation to Douglas County is stand on the great numbers that you have. Don't go backwards. Keep going forwards. Pay your teachers better. You passed the mill levy. Hold yourselves accountable. Put policies in place that make sure you treat teachers fairly. That's all they want. That's why they run to the union. They don't believe that you'll treat them fairly.
What's interesting about that in terms of Douglas County is among the top 10 performing school districts in the state, only 2 have master agreements. One of those 8 districts that does not is Douglas County Schools. So that certainly should, you would think, send a bit of a signal, Superintendent Gaal. But let's talk for a moment about those performance improvements that you are seeking to achieve in District 11 as superintendent. We have seen some modest improvements year over year at D11, but do you think it's fast enough? And what measures and steps are you taking to improve the quality of education and the outcomes that District 11 students are able to achieve?
Yeah, I couldn't be prouder of the growth that we've had over the last several years. Enrollment's up. We're one of the only districts in the state that's had positive enrollment over the last 3 years. That's mostly through following parent choice. As it comes to the academics in our traditional schools, of which we spend a lot of time focused on, we've added both math and ELA achievement every year over the last 3 years. This year, we're expecting even stronger outputs, particularly in our high school and our elementary portfolios. I think what we've been freed from in the master agreement, again, in our first year here, is this is the first first year that we've had the authority to be able to say, I've looked at your numbers in your individual classroom. It appears that things aren't going in the direction that we had hoped. Here is the prescriptive additional training that we would like you to take to ensure that we improve outcomes for children. That used to be something we had to negotiate with the union. And this year alone, I'll give an example. The couple of dozen teachers that we pulled into a small group that we call Mission Math Possible. I'll read you the numbers here exactly. 71% of the middle school teachers who completed Mission Math Possible have now moved their what we call median growth percentile up above 50%. And so that's the measure that says it's at least gap closing, which means the kids are learning more in that classroom than they are in the average classroom in America. And we identified those teachers in the beginning of the year by having a median growth percentile of less than 35, which means that the gap is getting wider. So our ability to address and put the resources against the area of need and not having to sit down and negotiate based upon an 80-page master agreement that ironically never once talks about student achievement. It just continues to talk about how adults feel about their workplace. We're just trying to flip the narrative that says if every one of our 4,500 employees, if every one of our 1,500 teachers can buy into the strategies and use the resources that we give to them, I promise you every third grader can read, every eighth grader can be ready for high school, and every high schooler can be ready for the rest of their life.
Kind of building off of that, in District 11, are there some other ways or some unique ways that you're measuring success in achievement and other standards and metrics in the district?
Yeah, I'll go back to the enrollment piece. We opened an innovation school last year at CSST, Colorado Springs School of Science and Technology. It's an innovation school, so it's in between the nimbleness of what a charter can bring and the economy of scale of what a district normally offers. And it's a partnership between a school district, District 11, higher ed, which is UCCS, and then the cyber and the tech industry that is a really growing part of our workforce development here in Colorado Springs. So our kids go to school in the back of the UCCS Cybersecurity Lab. That's their school. And they are partnered with UCCS, and they take dual and concurrent enrollment opportunities, and they think outside the box, and they go into there's like an ops center there at that cybersecurity lab, and they do case studies and they role play like, okay, today's attack is on the electrical grid. What are we going to do? And how do we hack into the system? And they're doing that with real world partners right by their side. So the kids are learning about a career in the classroom instead of having to go through this 200-year agrarian model, which is you will learn these following learning standards, and then you will then go through an application process, and it's up for you to make that transition into what I learned into what I'm going to do for my career. And the reason I bring it up is a thing that I measure. In the first year, District 11 loses, let me go back. Traditionally, District 11 loses in the choice game. People choose to leave District 11 schools. This one new school, CSST, 40% of the student population comes from outside of District 11 boundaries. So people are hungry for new and innovative ideas. And you know what? I don't know if that's a licensed teacher or not a licensed teacher. The union has a stranglehold on the idea that a teacher needs to carry a state license while a charter school teacher does not. And so your highest performing schools across the state are normally charter schools. And they do that without having the restrictions of state licensure. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not practiced. It doesn't mean that they're not studying. It doesn't mean that they're not content professionals in the learning objectives, and they are certainly accountable to those standards. Look at TCA, look at DSST, look at Thomas McLaren. These schools spread across the Front Range outperform traditional schools all day long because they have the flexibility to maneuver. They pick the right people for the job. They're not held hostage by a set of last in, first out. Could you imagine if that's what was happening in the place that you work right now, that your idea to run this podcast has to first go to the person that's been at the Gazette longest, and they don't have the energy that you bring to this? Well, the Gazette would be out of business.
Superintendent Gaal, just a few minutes left with you, and it sounds to me like you're of the mindset, going to that sort of cliche but a very true expression that a rising tide lifts all boats, that applies when it comes to school choice in District 11 and broadly speaking across the state of Colorado, that in fact, when you have school choice, it is a rising tide that lifts all boats for students and teachers alike.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the challenge that has come with choice for so many people is how do they access it and how do they exercise it? Normally, choice is most exercised by families who can exercise it in several different ways. One, they can buy a house in the boundary of the school that they want. Two, they can get tutoring and support for their kid if they're struggling. Or three, in a state like Colorado, as long as there's an open seat and they can provide transportation, their kid can go there. So, our idea of expanding the portfolio means that I'm going to get to the families who can't quite figure out how to exercise choice. I'll use Mitchell High School as a great example. Mitchell High School has an MOU that they partner with the Colorado Military Academy, which is a charter school several miles away. Mitchell High School has an Air Force Junior ROTC program, which is a thriving part of Mitchell High School. Remember, Mitchell High School in the 70s was the number one school in Colorado Springs, and now it's on the state watch list, moving its way up and off. We're super proud of the work that's happening, but they're partnered with Colorado Military Academy because they have a Civil Air Patrol. There are a lot of similarities and overlaps between Civil Air Patrol and Air Force Junior ROTC. Having those students partner together and think alike in spaces that isn't just about the school that their parents chose for them means that they're collectively sharing in a learning environment that allows them to build kinship and collaboration and understand that there's a pathway for them, whether they chose Colorado Military Academy or Mitchell High School, that allows them to get access to things that they might not have had before. And the MOU goes in reverse. A small school like Colorado Military Academy can't field a football team, but the kids at CMA are allowed to play football with the kids at Mitchell. So, how do we create an ecosystem which isn't us versus them? And remember, the number one people that don't like the charter movement is the union. Go ask CEA if they support the expansion of charters. Go ask CEA if they support CSI. Go ask CEA if they support mill level equalization. Understand the fact that we have to be open to an ecosystem that works for every kid within the boundaries of your district, within your city, within your county, and within your state. Colorado is plummeting where it is on student achievement. Who would have thought that in 2026, I would be reading the Mississippi Plan for a third grade READ Act? And that's what we've been doing, and that's what we're adopting, because even our own READ Act plan in the state of Colorado doesn't have the teeth in it that it needs to ensure that children are literate. The greatest risk to a child's future is being illiterate. It is not because your parents picked to go to a school that CEA doesn't support. Make the right choice for your kid. The most important choice you'll ever make as a family is where you send your child to school. Visit the school, talk to the administrators, talk to the other children. If you find joy in the building, send your kid there. I promise you they'll thrive. We believe in District 11, we have a school for every student in our city and beyond. Come join us. Don't pay attention to the master agreement or any of that noise. It is the last breath of a dying beast. Let's move forward, Colorado.
Briefly, there's been public discussion about possible bond increase in District 11 schools. Is there anything that you can talk about in that regard in terms of your plans or what you think might be happening in the fiscal situation in District 11, especially at a time where, of course, there's always talk of funding schools more, whether that is, as we were talking about before, a mill levy override to pay teachers more or a bond increase for primarily capital expenditures?
Yeah, I'll give you another head scratcher. Again, there's 17 school districts in El Paso County. 16 of them have passed at least one bond in the last 20 years. District 11 being the one that has not. And again, District 11 being the only one that had a master agreement that was unionized. So if you're looking to connect the dots, everybody else around us has found a way to ask their community and ask their taxpayers to take on the burden of recapitalizing those buildings and those programs. You mentioned mill levies before in Douglas County. Those are commitments and quality votes that the community believes in what's happening. The fact that District 11 lost its last bond, I think, is a direct correlation to, again, being the only unionized system within the county. I can't connect the dots any other way. There's a couple of things to point out here in District 11 as it contemplates and presents the idea to the Board of Education on putting a ballot initiative on for November of 2026. First of all, we have the oldest buildings within the state. We are one of the original school districts at 150 years old, General Palmer in founding Colorado Springs. We've made an internal investment in reimagining Palmer High School as the original Colorado Springs High School. Come see that and come see how great it feels to be building a new building. We did that without going to the taxpayers. This idea of going to the taxpayers, we've built a bond campaign where every student in the system wins. We want to stop pitting one school against another. Again, I said to you that the most important choice you make is where your kid goes to school. You should believe that if your taxes are going to increase, that your kid's going to win. Whether you go to an old elementary school, a newer elementary school, one of our 5 different high school campuses that we have, whether you go to a charter school, whether you're an innovation campus, everybody should win. And we at the center of the city should be leading the city into how it is that we make the future viable for kids. There's a small fact hidden within the way the dollars have played out. District 11 has passed mill levies. We've had to use some of those mill levy dollars legally, but we've had to use them against some of our capital needs at some of our aged buildings. And so when we pass a bond, it's going to free up mill levy dollars that we can immediately reprogram against compensation. And so it's about $20 million that we tie up every year at a mill levy that are covering the aged needs of our facilities, that when we pass a bond and we reinvest in our buildings through a bond campaign, we then have $20 million. And so if I make the math easy for you, if it's $15 million of mill levy that we can free up and we have 1,500 teachers, that's a $10,000 raise per year for every teacher in the system. That puts us not only first in the county, that puts us at a much lower cost of living to Denver at an equal pay base to what Denver teachers make. So that just really rearranges everything when it comes to, if we have the best pay, we'll have the best teachers. If we have the best teachers, we'll have the best results. Never have I ever heard that come from a union member on how do we actually make sure that we could have that type of differentiated pay across our system.
Finally, as the superintendent of one of Colorado's largest school districts, as you said, one of its very oldest school districts as well, you really have visibility too on what's happening in districts across the state. Is there any trend that you see, perhaps including or even other than the decline of master agreements in school districts? As we noted, fewer than 40 of Colorado's 179 districts have master agreements with the unions. But are there trends or changes that you see that are working in Colorado schools writ large?
Yeah, one of the things I'm really proud of what I see happening in Colorado is a lot of attention on alternative licensure opportunities. How do you take people mid-career and figure out how we can train them to actually be advantages in the classroom? Oftentimes, people that have had a different set of experiences can be a real addition to our students and to our learning population. Colorado is very friendly on its alternative licensure, so I'm super proud of that work. I'm also very proud at the workforce development work that I've seen happen at the state level. We have some of the most robust CTE and pathway programs across the state. It's been a real strong suit for District 11 for some time. And this idea of every 12th grader having a plan starts with making sure that kids get exposure to workforce development, even when they're going to college. Go take a cybersecurity class before you commit to going to Stanford to study cybersecurity. Make sure you know what you're going to get into before you obligate yourself to that. The other thing I'm super proud of is our relationship, and I see this in some other districts as well, with our local higher ed. District 11 happens to be very unique in the sense that we have 3 higher ed institutions that live within our boundaries. Pikes Peak State College, UCCS, and Colorado College are all within those boundaries. And then, of course, as an alumni to the Air Force Academy, they might not be within my boundaries, but they're certainly within our reach. Our kids getting exposure to what a real college experience can be and having those 4 different levels and experiences in their own backyard is just a tremendous opportunity for kids to, not have to go spend money with their families and travel out of state and come up with ways that they can figure out what are the colleges that are of an opportunity for me. Colorado has all the pieces in place. There's some irony in the fact that Colorado was a leading state on choice, and now you're seeing and feeling a lot of pushback on choice. I think we have to continue to follow the market demand. Don't shut down homeschool enrichment. Let those parents actually make the right choices for their kids. I promise you those kids are doing great. We have some good homeschool enrichment partnerships, and we're growing them. Every time I meet some of those kids, I hear them that they have a real passion for the way that their family is addressing their education. They're not coming in uneducated. They're not coming in off learning standard. We have to stop thinking that those personal decisions, and they're very serious decisions that families make, we should not think that they're wrong. We should celebrate families because ultimately we're employed by the family. Our budgets come from the tax base. And if we don't follow that market shift, then we're going to find families putting us out of business from the traditional perspective.
There you go. Fascinating conversation. Michael Gaal, Superintendent of Colorado Springs District 11. Thanks for joining us on the OpEdge.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Thanks for tuning in to the OpEdge. If you enjoyed today's episode, please drop us a like. Subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, and be sure to share this episode with your friends and colleagues. For the Gazette, I'm Jimmy Sengenberger.